7 o'clock. Good to go. Well, as you remember, I'm Peter Flinter. Our firm, Dodson and Flinter, was hired to take on this project, and we're having a good time. Dylan Sussman is my senior associate and is going to take us through some slides, and then we're kind of a work in progress kind of meeting. We have some stuff on tracing paper, as you can see, but we really want to show it to you before we get too much further. Make sure we're on the right track and see what you think. So take it away, Dylan.
All right. Yeah. So tonight we want to, we had a workshop, public workshop back in September, which some of you were at, I think not all of you. So we want to go through what we heard at the workshop and then talk about the vision for West Upton that we have come up with based on the analysis that we shared in the first couple of meetings, and then what we heard at the workshop as well, and then get your feedback. So where we are in the process, so we have a schedule with 5 working group meetings. This is the third of those. We completed 2, and we completed that public visioning workshop. So we'll be back in January to sort of try to make some decisions, if there's some decisions to be made based on tonight, and then have focus groups in January and February with people who'd be impacted by the plans, and then try to wrap things up with final plans in February and the final public forum in April. So as a reminder, we're talking about West Upton Center, centered basically on the intersection of Main Street and Hartford Ave North, Hartford Ave South, and Mitchell Ave, but stretching out to about Glen Ave to the west and about Mendon Street to the east, and running south to the railroad tracks and north to basically kind of like one parcel deep from Main Street. So summarizing the workshop, we had a couple parts to the workshop. The first one, we did a walking tour around the area, which was always a really great way to get to know the place and for people to be able to show us like really specifically what's working and what's not working. So a couple themes from that. On circulation and safety, people said the area felt invested and unsafe for pedestrians. There are too many curb cuts. Some of them are really, really long, like the one around the gas station there. And circulation is can be unclear. There's a lot of noise we experienced when we were on the site walking around. It was pretty difficult to have a conversation, especially on Main Street. I think that there's a lot of truck traffic. There are also a lot of cars that are just extra loud. A lot of people, I think, revving up to get through that area when as soon as the light turns green, they're hitting the gas and making a lot of noise. So it's kind of unusually noisy village center. Parking it's pretty clear that parking is a concern in the area, that there's sort of limited parking. It's all basically isolated on different lots. There are no central parking areas, and it's probably pretty inefficiently used. In terms of the public realm, which is kind of the street right of way, people said that they wished that the power lines were buried and that the signage was improved. People talked about how they liked the sort of historic buildings, New England character that's in West Upton Center. And then we heard a lot that people do not like the BP gas station, which they see as unattractive, and right at the main intersection there, looking kind of like it's poorly maintained and just not adding to that character of the area. In terms of green spaces, we heard that there's sort of too much paved area in West Upton Center. There's desire for sort of more plantings, more street trees, more landscaped areas, and the areas that are green are kind of underutilized. So for example, we stood around the area behind the Bank of America drive-through box, I guess, ATM box. And there's an interesting little space in there, but it's not used for anything other than sort of lawn and shrubs. It's not an area where you would actually go and hang out, but it could be. And then on the other hand, you have areas like in front of the coach homes, the housing authority property, senior housing, I believe. And that, you can see that the residents in there have put out tables and chairs and they're using that space. They're hanging out outside, but it could be more sort of more durable furnishings, more permanent and improved. There's some of the things we heard at the walking tour. So then we came back to the community center, did some presentation and broke out into stations. We had 2 stations. One of them was focused on, we called activating the place. So looking at the small things you could do to make West Upton more inviting and appealing for spending time in. What we heard there is that heard a lot about the businesses people really like. So people really like the coffee bean. They want more of that. People want more of that kind of business in West Upton Center. And they're concerned that if there's change in West Upton Center, that it might threaten the existing businesses there. So I think people recognize that the West Upton Center is not like a major commercial center that's going to draw the most successful businesses ever, right? It's a local serving area. It has probably a limited market. And so what's there now is our local serving businesses, which are great, but they probably depend on relatively low rent spaces. So if you build new things, presumably they're going to be nicer spaces and demand higher rents. And so how does that work with the kind of the existing businesses that are there and new businesses that might come in? At the same time, I think there's a desire to make it more of a commercial hub, right? What we heard is that when you compare Upton Center and West Upton Center has more going on in terms of businesses. It's more of a place where you can go and get things and buy what you need. And so people want to build on that strength. We heard a lot of interest in just general beautification, things like planters and hanging baskets and seating and so forth. People talked about the little alley between Maya and Post Office as an untapped space. They thought it was a really cool space and that it could be turned into something attractive and more. People talked about the desire for murals and that possibly there could be a partnership with the technical high school to paint some murals in the center. And that there were needs to make, it'd be good if there were trail connections into West Upton Center in various different ways, particularly from Stenreen Villas, which is the Molten Circle development. And then just, is there an opportunity for sort of temporary pop-up events? People mentioned farmers markets. Looking at you, I think you mentioned farmers markets. So, and then for precedents of other town centers people like, it was Grafton and Concord centers. People described all the elements that make a great village center, having parking, nice sidewalks, and businesses that open up onto streets and attractive storefronts, and all of the things that make a village center. So I think that the question is how do you make that happen in West Upton Center, given what's there now and what's possible for the future. For the second station, people used these little styrofoam models to explore how redevelopment could make West Upton Center a better village center. Peter, do you have any takeaways from this?
Yeah, I think we had some very creative ideas, including from the younger set. But those of you who were at the workshop know that we talked a lot about the potential for infill. Let's look at infill development and maybe fill in some of the gaps along the street. Let's look at consolidated parking behind the buildings. And I think everybody who was at the workshop and came to the station sort of got that pretty easily. And we had some interesting experiments like that a large parking lot in this flat area behind the Upton Plaza could absorb the need for parking and then allow the redevelopment along the corridor there. So instead of seeing the parked cars and the gas station, you could see something like what was there 150 years ago, which is buildings. And there's also there's an opportunity that people were exploring for replacing the existing, what's the name of that town? Coach Road with new buildings that could take advantage of some of the modern sort of parking building, and then have better parking on the back, sort of on that terrace as you go up the hill. And then there was also, this is like that's just an extra building, but there was also some ideas for putting solar panels up on the hill. And then similarly on the south side of Main Street to sort of fill in some of the gaps, like next to the post office, maybe replace those buildings and then consolidate the parking in the back. So I always find that people very quickly understand pretty complex design ideas when we bring in models, and that certainly proved to be the case again. Here's some ideas for building a building on the corner, looking north over Main Street, looking possibly at a roundabout instead of a traffic light. We're going to probably keep that in our final report as a possibility, which a lot of people thought might be good for that site. I think a lot of us were very skeptical about roundabouts 10 years ago, and now we love them. You don't have to wait at the light. And some not there. We certainly, the town does not have control to build a roundabout there. The state already has invested many millions of dollars redoing that intersection. So you know, 2 + 2 equals. It's going to be a while before they redo it and put in a roundabout. But it's always, when we're doing these exercises, none of these things are actually going to happen. But by experimenting with it, I'll show you some plans we've been doing. You can sort of understand, well, why have people built stuff where they have? Why does it look the way it is? And then what are the different alternatives for the future? And would any of this be better than just letting nature take its course? And right now, given the existing zoning, there may not be much change there for the next 20 or 30 years. But if we look at something, and we'll talk about the vision, if our vision is for something different, maybe we need to change the zoning. Maybe we need to make some public investments. Maybe we need to get neighbors working together to build shared parking. But all that stuff starts with some kind of a crazy idea that we put on paper and then talk about, well, would that be a good thing or not? So roundabout is one of those ideas. Also, another idea is to sort of replace the parking lot in front of the plaza building with a park. Put parking behind the building and then maybe replace it with somewhat taller buildings. So maybe instead of a 1-story strip mall, it could be a 3-story building with the same amount of shops on the first floor, but then apartments above. Yeah, I found these very helpful as we were thinking of different ideas.
Then the last thing we did in the workshop is we had people fill out Mad Libs about their vision for the town center. A lot of them used the word charming. Charming was the vision for the village center. People talked a lot about wanting sort of a center for community life, a place to see people and to run into people and to have a sense of I guess neighborliness and connection to other residents in Upton Center. So lots of really great stuff in there, and we'll share those in the final report. And we use those as the basis of writing a vision for Upton Center. So some findings for sort of the project I guess as a whole at this point, combining the existing conditions analysis and what we've heard through the meetings and through the workshop. So I think first there's this sort of critical mass already of businesses in West Upton Center that makes it the kind of commercial hub of Upton. And so continuing to build on that seems like it would be a good idea. The area isn't currently functioning from what we saw as kind of a park once destination. So it doesn't seem to be a place where you go, you park, you visit one business, you walk to another business, you visit that one, you walk to a third business, you visit that one, you go to the park and sit down and have a cup of coffee and then go somewhere else. It doesn't seem to function that way. It seems to be that you go for a single reason, you park, you do your thing and you leave. So that's a big difference from the kind of village centers that people said they liked, like Grafton, where you have a lot in one place, plus a parking structure that enables you to park one time and explore. There's really strong historic character in the area, but it's also mixed with kind of the center, the main intersection, having been redone to suit auto-oriented developments. It's been redone to make it easy to get cars in and out. And both the site design and the building design reflects newer stages of development, which we heard people don't like as much as they like the historic character of the area. And then, as I mentioned before, there's a few properties that are sort of poorly maintained or not as attractive. As we've mentioned in the first two meetings and also at the workshop, West Upton Center has significant physical constraints, right? It has steep slopes and bedrock. It has wetlands and streams. And so it's kind of hemmed in. The area that's usable easily is fairly hemmed in to close to the road edges that are there now. As I mentioned before, parking is a big constraint in the center, both because the parking is on each individual lot for each individual use, but also because of those physical characteristics. So going from, when you flatten out for a parking lot in one site, it often creates, you end up creating a wall to the next site or a steep slope to the next site. So it's, there are limited areas to create larger parking areas. They do exist, but it's not super easy. The state highway is both a strength and a weakness. It's noisy and it has a lot of traffic. So that makes the experience of being in West Upton Center less pleasant. But on the other hand, it means there are a lot of potential customers coming through the area. So that's good from the perspective of creating opportunities for business, which also creates opportunities to, those can be local serving businesses and become the backbone for the kind of commercial and community hub that people say they want. The opportunities, we've heard a lot about streets and sidewalks, lack of sidewalks, and intersections that are confusing and dangerous. The opportunities to improve those are kind of limited because the streets in West Upton have really narrow right-of-ways. And also because there's a lot of work that's already been done or is planned to be done along Main Street. So the state has already kind of redone the main intersection of Hartford and Main. And so that's probably not going to come around and be redone anytime soon. And they've also redone a lot of the sidewalks and will do more sidewalks. So the state highway is probably not going to be changed all that much until you get to the next cycle of MassDOT improvements, which is a long way away because you just went through a cycle. And then on the town roads, the right-of-ways are narrow and they're often bordered by wetlands or other constraints. So it's hard to expand those and put in sidewalks. On the other hand, streetscape and sort of placemaking improvements seem like they're really important to make the place feel better, because that's people's primary experience of West Upton Center. It's either driving through it, walking through it on those streets, or going and visiting businesses or living in their own house. So there, we think there are opportunities to improve things like adding benches or planting trees, adding hanging baskets, things that would make it feel like more of a center, make it more attractive without making major infrastructure changes. There are opportunities for redevelopment, and Peter's going to talk about those later. I would say it's because of the physical constraints, it's not an area that's like ripe for whole-scale redevelopment, but that's probably kind of good, right? Because in most towns we work, people don't want major change, but they want some improvement. And so there's enough opportunities in West Upton Center that you could get some bang for your, somebody could get some bang for their buck. That would make it a more functional and attractive village center. But it's not like every parcel in West Upton Center has opportunities. The zoning doesn't really reflect what's on the ground in the area. So if you look at a map of which properties conform to the zoning, which, in other words, which properties could be built under the zoning, it's very few. Almost all of them are not conforming with the zoning. So that limits the possibilities for future change. And I think that we've heard that there's probably a bit of a mismatch, particularly in the commercial and industrial district, which is over in this area here, where it's zoned for commercial industrial. Single family houses are not allowed under the zoning, but that's most of what's there, particularly along Main Street. So that seems like something that would make sense to change the zoning. So it both matches the existing conditions, the desired future character, and the desired future uses. The area is currently providing diverse housing opportunities, and that's a good thing, right? So it's there are apartments of various apartment buildings and townhouses or duplexes and single family houses. So it provides for a lot of different types of housing, which means that there's different price points, and it means that different people can live in West Upton Center. And I think that's a good thing that should be celebrated and continued. So when planning for the future, probably want to continue that diversity and make sure you're not threatening it. And then finally, I think we've heard that people really value West Upton Center, and they want it to be the best it can be as both a sort of business and community hub. I'm gonna stop there. Does that all sound like what you all have said or heard through this process? Yes? Okay. Is anything missing? All right. All right. So moving on to the so we've got a written vision for West Upton Center, and then there are some drawings that Peter will share. So the written vision, by 2045, West Upton Center will be a walkable and welcoming village hub that reflects the town's historic character and community values. Distinct from the nearby civic core, meaning Upton Center, it will serve as Upton's lively commercial center, a place where residents and visitors gather to enjoy shops, cafes, services, public spaces, and events. An attractive art-filled streetscape will invite people to linger, supporting a thriving local economy, a strong sense of place. Redevelopment will bring buildings closer to the street, introduce mixed-use buildings, and transform underutilized sites into community assets, while preserving the historic structures that define West Upton's identity. Green infrastructure, shared parking, and thoughtful landscaping will manage stormwater, enhance visual appeal, and reduce impervious surfaces. Trails extending from the village will connect people to nearby natural areas. West Upton will remain a place where small town charm, local commerce, and housing come together to create a vibrant and enduring heart of community life. Does anything out there jump out at people as like particularly great or particularly terrible? No?
Yeah, that was it.
This reflects the Mad Libs.
Yeah, yeah, like some Mad Libs
You
and
would have to, for like you were.
any one of the Mad Libs, as I said before, we had like 10 or 15 people at the workshop, but any one of those Mad Libs could be perfect for West Upton Center. But we tried to bring them all together and pick up on the things we heard, like people wanted a lot of art in the West Upton Center. Yeah. One thing the bringing buildings closer to the street, that's particularly in the center, main intersection. So there's sort of consistent patterns of front setbacks as you head out to the east and the west on Main Street and then along the streets to the north and the south. But in the center, there's sort of a real disconnect in how far the buildings are from the street and the way they're shaping the center. I think we should turn to the drawings now.
Give people a flavor of what we're thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Early stages yet, but you'll get the idea. Hold the desk a little toward you by about a foot. You can sort of see this easel. So this is a big view. And we have a bunch of slides, but we decided not to walk you all through that first. But the slides sort of capture the different themes that we've been talking about in the workshop: circulation, parking, open space, and so on. One of the things, as Dylan said, which you all know, is that there's a lot of what we call constraints on redevelopment. So there's like some big open spaces to the south and to the north, but this is sort of town-owned land. There's a big property up here. There's a large property that's connected to Knowlton Estates. However, that was pretty much blocked out because it's difficult to get to once they build Knowlton Circle, but also probably the arenas that they came to when they built Knowlton Circle restrict the future use of that. Now, we did look at the deed and it doesn't forbid future development, but it's pretty unlikely. And then the real thing is it's probably pretty ledgy. You drive up there into their sort of parking area and you see this big ledge coming out of the ground. And it's also steep to get up there. So probably not a big development opportunity. The same thing on the north. You could get up there. There's an existing route up Lodge Avenue, but pretty poor access, very steep where it comes down. And it's hard to imagine that the town would look kindly on a lot more cars sliding down that hill in the wintertime. And somebody suggested, well, maybe you could run a road all the way across, but you're going through some very steep territory, even if you do decide to develop the land. And the cost of it is probably ledge, long distance to build a road. I think it's pretty unlikely that not something that we would see a need for.
Peter, can I just
Develop. Yeah.
Conservation community is also a conservation area.
Right.
So it's got Article 97 connection, right, which you want to explain to people that you need a lot of permits to develop it, and also we need to replace anything that is off the development with other open space someplace else.
Right. So because it's under the control of the Conservation Commission, it isn't being owned by the town. State law protects it. Because years ago, the state discovered that a lot of people were looking at parkland and saying, this would be a great place for an industrial park. And so they passed that law decades ago. That made it very hard. I mean, you can't go to the state legislature and move things around, but that's another reason why it's pretty unlikely to be developed. And then there's the wetlands and the floodplain along the river. There's more steep slopes along top here. The new 149 Main Street apartments were built on looked like a historic sort of meadow that was behind the old Knowlton residence.
There'll be a church up there.
Was there a church up there?
There'll be a part down.
And then there's a water course that runs sort of down through the middle, in a culvert in the center. And then there's more wetlands that drain into that to the north. So that doesn't mean there's no room for development, but what we're really going to concentrate on, what we have been looking at, is redevelopment of the area around Hartford Avenue and the Upton Plaza, possibly the Coach Road Apartments and the area immediately adjacent to Main Street on the south, where there's several sort of benches and terraces where you could build parking or buildings or what have you. The other area is the back of the old Millhouse Apartments. And what we want to talk about, would it make any sense to redevelop further down on Farm Street? But what we're looking at so far is really this area behind the apartments and then the intersection here. And a very quick sort of first look at that, which the lettering is upside down, but so it sort of shows how we approach this, which is pretty quick and messy. But basically the black buildings are existing buildings and the brown ones are new ones. The idea would be to, for instance, around the main intersection, to maybe find an area for a new consolidated parking lot to the north in this block behind the existing houses, to find room for parking behind the existing buildings on the south side. And then that parking can serve redevelopment that is up along the roadside, where it's more visible and more attractive. And it also can serve new development that's on the opposite side, perhaps, which could include new homes. And then similarly on the north side, possibility for new buildings to replace the gas station with parking tucked behind them. And then in what's basically the parking for Millhouse Apartments, there might be room to expand both the parking and the building area and maybe put some more apartments down there. And then there's a question of how do you solve the interesting, I guess we call it an organic tangle of streets and buildings on
Farm Street.
what is it?
On Farm Street.
On Farm Street. Also Centennial Court Way. I mean, it's a really interesting area. We could look at it in more detail, but like a lot of places that were created before zoning, nothing really makes sense. But as a result, it's really interesting. The different buildings, you've got these historic structures that face that sort of central space. You have the big mill. So one of the ideas is that, let's try to make some kind of a green center there, have a little park or a square that you can relate to. So it's not just driving through a parking lot. Boy, those are some of the big ideas. And we could get right into looking at this. So this is existing plan, basically traced from an ortho photo showing the Old Hartford Turnpike, Main Street, Upton Plaza, Coach Road Apartments, the gas stations, and the existing houses, the old church and post office. So all of it, there's a lot of stuff there. And a lot of it is really nice. Some of the things we think are, I won't say they're not nice, but it could probably reach the end of their useful life and could be redeveloped. The plaza building, of course, which is a big flat slab, functional in its day, it probably still, it's very busy, it's full of businesses. We don't want to drive out those businesses, but could we make it taller, have a better looking building with less dominance of the parking lot, and still have those businesses that we like to visit. The Coach Road Apartments, again, probably also they're 50 years old or something. Probably sturdy enough, but could you take advantage again of some of the modern techniques of building apartments and sort of give people shiny new apartments and have more of them on that site, so you get sort of more out of that land. So that's basically opportunities there. Here, there's a sort of sloping, as we saw in our site walk, there's a series of terraces that sort of slope up the hill, which makes it sort of difficult to drive directly up, but there's kind of a connected series of alleys that link these properties already. And as we talked about in the workshop, that's a great thing, because often, as Dylan said, you have everybody just doing their own parking on their own lot. And there's no interior connections. Everybody's got to pull out the main street and clog the intersection just to drive to the next building. So that's already on the right track. And there seems to be a fair amount of space in the back for what have you. So we're going to show you some plans of what that might look like. I mean, there's room for parking, there's room for more buildings. And that basically is one of the larger areas that appears to be redevelopable. And then you have that old stream. As far as I know, it's unnamed. Does anybody know a name for that? It runs under, is this your building?
That's everybody building. And,
Oh, here?
yeah,
Yeah, there's a culvert.
yeah.
It may not run, does it run right into your building?
My building.
Okay. I put a water wheel there. Generating electricity. Yeah, so that's an interesting feature that it was put in the culvert that dives here and then goes under your building and comes out again. I guess one of the good things about that is it creates some really nice sort of natural areas right in sort of the center of the village. So this is, again, we're showing like this whole place being redeveloped, and we're not saying, no one is going to actually do this. The town is not going to force anybody to do this, but it's just a way of sort of imagining what this vision might be like in 20 years. And then thinking about that, oh, would that be better than where it's going now? And if so, how do we get there? So this is sort of looking at each of those blocks as different opportunity. So starting with the Upton Plaza. These, again, the existing buildings are shown in gray. We've taken down the plaza, we've taken down the Coach Rose apartments and replaced them with somewhat larger buildings that would be served by a single larger parking lot that would extend across the neighboring properties. I don't know how you get those properties to agree to that, but again, it's sort of an idea which has been proven over and over again. If you can centralize the parking and make it easy to get there, perhaps it's even the town's own parking lot, you can get a whole lot of redevelopment happening. And then the key thing that happens by doing that is all of this is for people walking. They don't have to go in between cars or dodge cars coming in and out. There is easy access on both sides, but it's clear like where you walk and where the cars are going to be. There's room close to the buildings for accessible handicap parking, and then lots of room for 100 spaces in the back. And all of that allows you to build somewhat larger buildings here that would be sort of closer to the street, so that what you see is a beautiful building, as you did 100 years ago. There was a big building here. That wonderful sense of arriving at a real place, looking at this beautiful building, surrounded by beautiful landscaping. So you have an attractive building, typically with a tower on the corner, and then the red is sort of showing this interconnected pedestrian space. So each building sort of is placed to relate to the street, but also to create sheltered, welcoming pedestrian spaces. So in this case, a wonderful plaza. You could have the town flag flying there, place for a cafe, a nice entrance in the tower, and then you go into a wonderful building and spend a lot of money, which boosts your tax base and creates jobs. I mean, that's the vision, right? Trying to create a place that will actually attract businesses to want to be there. And then those businesses will earn enough money that they can pay the rent to actually build something like this. So see some common themes. So we're keeping the existing buildings, but looking for opportunities to maybe expand them in the back. So instead of 6 apartments, you have 12 apartments or whatever. Looking for opportunities to have new commercial space with convenient parking, but with surrounded by a nice pedestrian environment with a lot of trees planted along the street, beautiful outdoor plazas shaded by trees in the summer, and then connected, to the parking by a continuous sidewalk that, again, as Dylan said, one of the things you lack now is that park once environment. So this is designed exactly to do that. You park here, and you walk across, get a cup of coffee, and then you keep walking, and you go to another business. Or maybe you walk out to look at the beautiful wetland. And this is showing, like next to this parking, you could have, this is for Mike's benefit, and the Conservation Commission, a wonderful stormwater park that's collecting all the runoff from this and treating it before it runs into the stream. And I don't know if you bring the old stream up to the surface somehow, it's often something that people play around with, but regardless, there's a way to use the engine of this redevelopment to clean up a lot of runoff that's probably right now going directly into that brook. So this is a big idea. How many apartments are in Coach Road now? Well, I should know that. But the structure there is probably 25 or 30, right? So this is again, a larger single apartment building, but with some separate wings, upper floor that could be stepped back. This could be 2 stories, it could be 3 stories, it could be 4 stories. But we're showing it. One of the reasons that apartments often look this way is that it's convenient then to put the parking underneath. So there's kind of like a whole parking lot wrapping around on the first floor. It's set into the hill on the back, and so that part would be in the basement. And then you could stack up the apartments above. So again, a big idea, and a lot of money, but something which we know is successful in the market. I mean, they just built a similar size apartment down the street, but behind the old Knowlton house, right? But basically, it's similar. I think those were 2-story apartments, but a similar size in terms of the footprint. And then here's sort of continuing the idea of, a nice new building that would replace the gas station there with something that could be, 3 or 4 stories and look similar to the old hotel that was there. And then there's room for a little bit of parking where they have their existing parking now. And then a similar story on the south side. There's actually, there's quite a broad terrace here with relatively even grades, and also here to put pretty much all the parking we need. Looking at it now, it's like, wow, that's a lot of parking. But again, the idea is you get all the parking consolidated, you have a few access points that make it safer because there's not so many driveways, and then that allows you to add on to existing houses, to build new buildings, where the post office parking lot is now, to create wonderful little outdoor courtyards facing south, which could be, again, everything from a place for kids to play, preschool, to an outdoor cafe, what have you. And then, because you have all that parking, which is not needed 24 hours a day for the businesses, you can use that parking to serve maybe some new apartments or townhouses that are on the back of the property where it's quieter. And also they would enjoy views up into the hill, that open space.
That's one I did that. So I ended up putting my sister, my daughter in that daycare, like they just opened that we were standing in front of. And I would always hope that there'd be a daycare somewhere in this little, because it's an ongoing need for short parents. So yeah, we decided like at a find green spot for that building. Yeah, playground that's for the building, because in reality, that's still gonna be there. And I know the ones that different than they there before. So it just seems like as a logical use for the building. That would work. hate for you to have to draw that all over again.
That's this building,
Yeah.
yeah, and then they have some open space behind it.
Yeah,
Or
which,
they're-
if
they're
it
like
was
this.
cars in that courtyard, like you're talking about. Out for it or something, or it's just like. Spaces connected to or something.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. There's no reason you can't carve those spaces out.
Yeah,
It becomes part of the neighborhood. Other thoughts?
Question, so like the parking behind the strip mall, like you suggested it would be, so how would something like that happen? Town of Upton would say, we're acquiring land, we're gonna have a town parking lot. We need to buy a little bit of land from you 20 people. And all have a beach, how would that happen?
Would that work?
I don't know, how would it happen?
That's the easiest way. Yeah, because you've probably all visited many different towns where there's a big parking lot behind the main street. Concord and Lexington, other towns happened, and that happened over a long period of time. And sometimes it was driven by businesses that just said, this would be a lot more efficient if we work together to pave it all. But it is possible to change your zone to incentivize that kind of thing. The best example in my head is Derry in Connecticut, where they actually give business owners, landowners along the main street an incentive to give an easement across the back of their property for a town parking lot. And that incentive is in return for being able to add on to your building to a greater extent than is currently allowed by zoning.
Does Darien, does that?
Yeah, area. So for example, you could say all these people, maybe they don't have any right to build or that much development behind their house now. But if they allow the town to pave their backyard and use this as a parking lot, it could still be their property. But the town has an easement over it. They get free parking, which is maintained by the town. And they also get an incentive of being able to build taller, bigger buildings. So it's kind of like using the engine of the marketplace saying, we'll let you build more if you give more space for us to have parking, which then also mitigates the usual problem of why we don't want people to build so much. It's like, where are you gonna have the parking?
Yeah.
So it's sort of killing two birds with one stone. Apologize. By metaphor.
and it was typically rented units, like, or just, I don't know if it's sort of. Out the owners live in them or.
Well, from my observation, these appear to be rental units that are well maintained, but kind of old structures cut up into multiple apartments. So I assume they're not
That would be.
owner occupied.
One of them's actually, you would know better, are they owners occupied? I mean, I know one of them's. Yeah,
Right. So I mean, the kind of thing that's typical in a neighborhood like this. Probably find some owners and investors who are happy to go along with a plan like this and some that aren't. But it sort of starts with an idea.
I'm curious what the owners of. Like what you think of this, especially behind. Your house.
Yeah, we're actually showing total redevelopment.
Cause like yours would actually can make this change, some of these changes. I'm meaning like, I'm just curious what you think of the different ways, because you're someone that actually could change something. The way it looks. Not.
Well, it's your ownership and easements, that's the answers for both.
Yeah, I think we're up past the days when towns can just say,
We're doing this.
we're doing this, we're gonna take your land by eminent domain, sorry. It's really hard to do that. Unless it's a critical public emergency or need. So for just redevelopment purposes, it's pretty unlikely that anything that could be forced on somebody.
How much parking do we have there? It seems like a lot.
Yeah, this is like 100 spaces and similar here and here, so it is a lot.
So it's nice to be.
You certainly don't need it all now. But if you build,
It's probably not as bad as we think. Actually, we like to see that a lot in our west, like, when we're working the parking lot over here. Like at first you think you can get some, I mean, I don't think we're already on.
It's good section.
Yeah,
yeah, as you know, convenient free parking is good for business.
yeah,
A lot of places, including this one, there's probably all the parking you ever need, already there. Only it's all cut up in multiple properties, you don't know what's public, what's not.
my point is, I'm in favor of like having this much in there to start, if it's actually not reality destroying, it wouldn't actually be that.
Right, and then, you know, we apparently are not giving up our cars,
Yeah.
taking helicopters or electric scooters to work. And probably in 50 years, we'll be driving electric cars, but even more of them.
Mhm.
And we'll still have them, well, maybe they'll go home and park themselves, right?
Yeah.
But we'll probably, for a long time, we're gonna need a similar amount of parking that we have here today. And generally, in old historic centers, you don't need 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet, which is what a lot of zoning requires in different towns, but at least 3 to have reasonable access to convenient parking most of the time. And that's basically the square footage of parking that is equal to the square footage of the buildings.
Mhm.
So all these new buildings need a similar area of parking in addition to serving the existing buildings. Just to kind of come up with reasonable demand. And also the extra parking does allow the possibility of more residential space. So these are each like 8,000 square feet. So what's an average apartment? Somewhere between 800,000. So that's 10 apartments on each floor. So if you have a 3-story apartments, that's 30 here, 30 here. Which is great in terms of access to parking. That's also 60 cars that you have to store when people come home at night. And the good thing about an arrangement like this is that people can use half of that parking lot at night, and a lot of them are going to be gone during the day when the businesses are busy. Well, that's true too. So, other thoughts? Again, this is kind of an exercise just to test different ideas, to come up, testing, what we think are sort of time-honored principles like shared parking, but testing them in a specific place. What other things should we look at? So far, I'm not hearing any objections, saying this is crazy.
I guess I wish there was a little bit more space, like, I like that there's moments to have, like at the top portion. But then below, I wish there was more than the kind of courtyard area, like. When it's a lot of parking, like when there be.
Right, so instead of a building here, just make it all a park, or to have a park here instead of a building. I mean, partly reacting, like in the white here is all of that big open space that goes up the hill over an open circle.
Mhm.
And that's, I don't know, the town could never acquire that for a park, but it seems to be used informally as a park now.
I'd love to see, level 2 and level 3 electric charging. We have to go way out to get, well, Hopkinton. We don't have local electric charging. Anywhere here.
In Hopkinton, is that at, not, I don't part of the letter, is it at a gas station or is it like the town, like, you like pay for town?
I think both.
Yeah, we just drove driving out of Northampton, at the exit where you get on the 91. They just built a new facility. It's a private facility, like a coffee shop, with a big row of chargers, and that's their business.
That's what
That's cool.
Sell people some food while they're charging up their car and then they hop off the highway.
That would be a real cool innovation for us.
Then you get to the hours of like the town to pay for it, but
Oh,
Oh,
prices,
yeah.
definitely.
Any other suggestions of things we should look at differently? You'd like us to move the stream from under your
No,
building?
that's fine. I apologize that I've not been at the meetings. I have actually never gotten any announcement about any of the meetings. I heard by word of mouth, there was the walking tour, and I got confused about the hour, and I came an hour late, and I had no, and people from Coach Road said, oh, there were people over there an hour ago, but I had no idea where anyone was going, so that was me there. I'd very much like to see, my building included in, some thoughtful use of it. I certainly don't anticipate being around in 2045. But the building certainly should be camping. And yeah,
If we have time, we have some more
yeah,
ideas and case studies of other towns that have done. Sort of once you build all this stuff.
Yeah.
What happens there?
Yeah.
How can you attract people?
we were hard,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. What's gonna happen to that when I'm not here?
Do you think this kind of redevelopment would help the art gallery business?
Good. Yeah, obviously I have 4 parking places there, but, at the back, that's, so, which then means if I want to have, when we were originally in, Madison, Wisconsin, we had regular openings every couple of months, and we had literally hundreds of people coming into our house with, on the National Historic Register. And we were zoned to be able to do that. When we have here, we have no place to park, so we've never had a place. And so, people don't even know we're here. Mostly. How many of you noticed that? How many to my house? So, and I would like to think about some way that it could be beneficial to the town. It's one time, here to be.
Parking lot.
No, it's too nice. Now with my stained glass windows, no apartment, how many?
I see, that's like a gem, a big gem, and it has, nobody has access to, and that could be the major draw, if you're talking about restaurants and whatnot, if people have, it's incredible. There's an open.
Didn't bring my checks on this.
Those guys, they show the traffic. Is there like, does the state say when they fit or don't fit, traffic flow wise, or? I don't know how you figure that out.
There is a process. The state typically, they have their own engineers at DOT, they hire engineering consultants, they do all the work. I mean, the way engineers work is they basically observe how things work in real life in thousands of other intersections, hundreds of thousands of intersections. And then they can calculate based on that and based on the traffic flow when people are driving over those little traffic detectors, exactly what will work in a spot and what won't. And then you hope for the best. It's the same in the, traffic roundabouts haven't been around as long here, and so they're still collecting information and data. And my observation is they build it and then they often adjust it, make the middle bigger or smaller, work around with the lanes. So it's, my observation, it's not an exact science, but it's becoming more of a science. And there's a lot of traffic that comes through here, so you probably need a 2-lane roundabout.
So I wasn't here when they did that last TIP project, but I heard that they evaluated it for a roundabout there. And it was not the appropriate size right of way in order to accommodate a roundabout, because I think what they would need to do, as Peter was alluding to, traffic counts and things like that. I think the size roundabout that they would need there would have been bigger than what they intend to put just outside here, right? Which is more smaller scale, because of the traffic count in that intersection would have to be larger. And I think we kind of get a sense just by looking at that picture, it's tight.
I think we actually did, we pulled up a roundabout from a similar, and this is just a single lane roundabout. But would take up a good chunk of that, and you have to, you'd have to take out, I don't know if you'd have to take down the church, but
Which
you
would
probably
be
could still use.
we wouldn't.
You heard me grumble. No, no. Tell me what pedestrians do with a roundabout situation.
There's crosswalk.
How do, I mean, I feel since they've been in all of these lights, I feel safer crossing to go to the post office. And that safety is a direct thing for me because before they put that in, I crossed from my building to the post office and a woman made a left turn off Main Street into me. And I could be dead now, except for, praise God. So pedestrian safety is really important.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, roundabouts typically, they pull the crossings a little bit further back from the intersection.
Okay,
But the main thing with roundabouts is that you can't drive fast. Because they point you towards the center and you see, there's no more road there.
yeah.
So it's almost impossible to drive, as you've discovered, it's impossible to drive into a roundabout really quickly. And also you can't do it without paying attention. Well, I guess you could, but you cause an accident.
People test that.
So the theory with roundabouts, and I don't know if your experience, but mine certainly have been, is that you slow way down, you look and you wait. And that makes it safe for pedestrians because all the cars are stopping and looking.
It's not.
And you don't get that many pedestrians.
But
And then you can have the flashing signals.
in all reality,
When I'm labeled to stand to avoid that.
You're probably gonna get one here in the center. So you'll be able to see.
yeah,
Make a point.
I mean, I find it's not the roundabout, but they incorporate, those raised crossings just ahead of the roundabout, with the flashing, lights, and those flashing lights help a lot.
yeah.
I live in the center of Grafton, and ever since they put those up, it's so much easier to get across this same exact road at 140, so.
Let's turn to the smaller thing, Centennial Way? Centennial Court. So here's Centennial Court coming down. Again, the gray is all the existing buildings. And then there's the old hat factory, the Millhouse Apartments, and their existing parking. So there's a lot of parking in here. There's the road coming through. There's a lot of pavement, but it's very efficiently distributed. Partly, as we've discovered looking at this, that's because of the grades. It's going up like 10%. So like fairly steep slope for a road. 1 foot rise and 10-foot length, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're driving, you feel it, and walking. So it's sort of a 10% grade coming on here. It's got the curve and then it comes out onto Main Street. It's easier to redevelop an opportunity behind the mill house because we notice there's this long sweep of lawn that continues right across, well, there's a garage there, driveway, but basically there's a flat terrace that runs all the way across from east to west. And if we start with that, you could move the parking further down, put another bay of parking that comes all the way across, would pretty much come in an even grade from that all the way across to Farm Street.
Yeah.
And then you could get a lot more parking there. And again, that might open up some opportunities sort of on the edge of the existing parking to expand with some new apartment wings or separate apartment buildings. which they could be 2-story, they could be 4-story, depending on what was needed.
Do you envision that as parking that would service that restaurant, because it's kind of far away?
Well, that is a possibility. They've got, this is kind of their existing parking lot, cleaned up a little bit.
Which is about 10% what they need.
Yeah. So this idea is, well, what could you do fairly simply? So this is removing the higgledy-piggledy parking from in front of the old senior center. They could park over here. Clean this up, put a little pocket park with some new trees, sort of clarify where the road is actually going. There's quite, as you know here, this sort of is set into a bank, so it's got garage doors on the lower level.
There's businesses underneath.
Yeah, so there's a big grade change coming up here. It's like 10% coming up. And it's a little
Well,
bit less.
it's what's down below or in front of the garage doors, business.
Yeah.
underneath.
So sort of cleaning up the road, trying to separate and clean up the parking. And then one of the ideas is that right now there's pretty much pavement right up to the front of those buildings, which is a shame because they're lovely buildings. So this is sort of, let's get it can stay in pavement, but it can stay as pavement, but let's make it a nice sidewalk with some trees. Maybe borrow a little something again to clarify the edge of the road, but also create a room for some new plantings. So that's kind of a fairly simple approach to cleaning it up. Removing some of the parking and shifting it over here. Well, the other thing here, I don't know if you can see this dash line here and here, but there's a possibility again for larger parking that would have the parking on the first floor. And then the parking would just be built above it. I mean, the apartments would be built above it.
Those houses you were just talking about, but it's sidewalk. What you do with all the cars that park in front of those buildings?
Well, they have parking behind the buildings now,
The other one, there's the front.
up here.
Yeah.
This is, we didn't address that plan because I know it's like, what are you gonna do? But yeah, if you remove the parking from the front, you would have to add parking along.
There's already a plan back there now for other things.
Right. But that plan includes more parking than they need for your buildings. So that, I guess that's,
I just told you.
yeah, so
That is the plan.
Were you envisioning that this is kind of level parking? Because if I can drive down here, level park, walk straight across to the restaurant,
mhm.
it would be neat if there was cafe eating in front of, Cody or the restaurant instead of dodging cars. And if
Yeah.
everybody went over here and parked, you can walk in a level way instead of, repelling to the restaurant. I just think it'd be really cool to have, cafe seating, green area and cafe seating,
Mhm.
restaurant, eatery. And then those people won't be subjected to large vehicles trying to park in a kind of impossible triangle.
Also, they have parking on, right, that covers the parking for the businesses underneath. If you get over the parking, but now seating area above it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, that would be so
Nice
fun.
stop facing.
The next level
Yeah.
walking, you.
If you're looking at parking across the street.
The gymnastics that you have to go through to go to this cool diner.
So you'd rather have them keep the parking in front?
I don't know what the solution is.
Yeah, I don't either.
The large parking lot that they're talking about on Russell Ave, it's a quiet residential street.
Right behind his house.
Yeah, yeah, I'm certainly aware of that, sensitive to it. I don't know what the solution is. Here's another quick take on trying to get some more open space there. Again, removing the parking from in front, but maybe creating a small parking lot in front of Cody. Sort of cleaning up the space. I mean, right now there's one driveway that serves this house. There's another driveway that serves the restaurant. So it's kind of a classic case of why do we need all this extra pavement that nobody can even,
And when you talk about all the cars behind there too, is when you go between those buildings, it's the width of your car.
Yeah.
right here.
Like if there's a person walking through there, the car can't drive through. That's how tight it is.
Yeah.
Dead end.
Yeah, we walked through there.
Wow.
So the idea here is to, instead of, I think part of this is town owned, part of it's privately owned, but working together, can we clean this up and make it work better for everybody? So have room for parking and room for driving in and out. And then consolidate the parking over here and have a nice, nice little park here. Park space there, clarify where the road is going, and everybody's happy. Maybe. And then this is, one of the things I want to ask you, this is looking at a possibility of, well, what could you do further down Farm Street? You have the existing landscaping business, existing septic business. And then if you were going to redevelop those, the logical thing would be, well, let's put the parking in the side and the rear and put a new building up with the street. Have a sidewalk in front, so it's easy to walk and connect that. And have a new building up across the street on the back, use the existing landscape yard for parking. So it's again, the same ideas over and over again. But the question for this project is, do we want to propose redevelopment of any kind further down on Farm Street? Where, that is your industrial district. Those businesses are presumably successful. They need a place to be. So is that something we want to recommend for development? We just say this is going to stay as more of an industrial part. Now, yes.
The last thing is eventually there is a better plot of that area, the restaurant.
And this is a house, these are houses. You've got the landscaping business, you've got the septic business. You have a lot of wetlands.
The dotted line up to 140 is pretty much all industrial already.
Right. Well, it's industrial zone. You get up here?
No, I'm just saying from that horizontal dotted line that you just had to faint around.
Right.
From there, if you go up Farm Street, it's kind of businesses up the road a little bit, up the other way.
Up this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a business under Cody's and there's the
Yeah.
septic business, there's a landscaper. There's a couple of houses, which may or may not be the same ownership. So I don't know, is it worth looking at redeveloping this for some use other than small contracting businesses?
Certainly worth trying to make it more attractive.
Yeah.
Senior housing.
That was our standard walking path. Yeah. Nice.
In the commercial industrial zone right there, there's probably more residential than there's commercial.
Yeah.
I thought it was like 80-20 or something.
Yeah.
So is it?
Yeah, so I think if this, this whole area is commercial industrial, right? So, and this is existing residential. This is residential. And then just in the back here, there's the sawmill. That's something that's industrial. And then as Peter said, basically right in here is our industrial uses. And then landscaper stretches over to Hartford Ave South. So the question is, seems like it's kind of no brainer to rezone this to be residential along the street. This is what it is now, and most people, I think, value the houses and the historic structures there. The question is really, there are things that are currently industrial in the back. And the swamp here, which then extends down to the railroad. Like, do you keep that as industrial, or do you make a district that's either industrial or residential or try to push it toward. I think our experience in other places is that residential is people who live next to it than industrial, but that there's also a shortage of the kind of spaces where you can have a landscaping business or a septic business. Those are in short supply, and so they are valuable for keeping your economy diverse and for providing the spaces you need to do the things that we all need. We all need landscapers and we all need.
But with the exception of the restaurant, that's what that area is that type of business.
Yeah.
The restaurant just doesn't really fit to the rest of what's there because of the parking needed. Or if the restaurant would locate to somewhere else, like maybe one of the buildings down in the intersection with the parking lots, they would do a lot better. It would be a lot more appealing to go and be able to park your car.
Yeah.
That'd be a lot less traffic down that road.
Because those other businesses are just the employees.
Yeah.
Yes, it just swap.
Yeah,
So she suggested that the car repair places should move down here.
yeah,
The what should move down?
Car repair?
which would actually be easier if you were taking your car to take it there to deal with the traffic on 140.
So that's what it is.
So I think what I'm hearing you say is like the businesses are here, so they should be allowed to continue to do that. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like car repair, I mean, that guy obviously doesn't want to pump gas. He can certainly repair cars down there.
At that price.
Is there a question?
Talk to the seniors that live in the senior housing.
Don't say,
Well said.
Yeah.
because I think we're back to the slides.
They complain about the noise and the smells that come from businesses there. Creating more green space for containers. Yeah.
That's where it's fine.
Yes.
All right.
I struggle with places to. Like there's, I don't think I'm coming to these meetings.
So,
I wonder if anybody's got an opinion.
so we have a lot more slides which kind of go into other, Peter's talked about redevelopment. They go into the other aspects of like making changes in village center. I feel like we've made good progress and we've often had meetings that are really long. So, and bored with presentations. So I want to offer an opportunity for you to say like, I've had enough tonight, or I want to dig into all the other topics.
Are you gonna share the things you're, like, I'm.
Yeah.
Are you gonna share that?
Okay, we'll look at some of the case studies.
We don't have to study all the maps. We can share that.
Sure. So yeah, so I think we can definitely come back and we can share them at the next meeting. Share some. So I'm gonna skip through some of these things. So this is about traffic and parking and streetscape. I think the biggest, as I said, there's some real challenges. I think the real opportunities are what Peter talked about, which are shared parking. And then I think another real opportunity is planting street trees. You have along Main Street, the sidewalk is right up against the street. So you don't have a tree belt in which to plant. But it is possible to plant, to encourage planting in the front yards, which would make a big difference in the experience of Main Street. And has been shown to slow traffic. So.
I think we used to have like oak trees in this town too, when we were down here.
And a lot of the towns around here did, and then just slowed down.
There's a guy, when you all were coming in, I wasn't here, I was looking at some of the old photos downstairs, and there's a beautiful photo, I think right in the entrance of Main Street where all the trees hanging over the street. So street trees, shared parking, and then advocating for bus service in West Upton, I think are all important. So example of shared rear parking, this is from West Concord, Mass. So see these 4 properties up here. You see the parking lot in the back. So those property owners all got together in 1999, and they basically advocated to share their parking. We got a special permit to do that, which allowed people to park once and visit all those businesses. And then in addition to that, they were able to signage and the drainage, get rid of the driveway, and then add a pedestrian path to the back of the lot. So that's the pedestrian path to the back of the lot, it's a cute little alley. This is showing along the street with the main driveway entrance down the bottom there. And then you can see that there's this sort of shared parking lot behind this row of storefronts and restaurants and so on. So I guess it is to say it is possible if you have property owners who are willing to work together and able to make it happen. Street tree programs are common in many communities in Massachusetts. I think they're becoming more and more common. So quick Google search, Northampton, South Hadley, Needham, Lexington, Brookline, Framingham, Melrose, Waltham, and a lot of other places have street tree programs. General structure is that the town provides trees. Often sometimes they'll have a municipal nursery where they're actually growing trees themselves. And they're planting usually pretty small trees, but those small trees have a better survival rate than when you get a bigger caliber tree. So, the town either buys the trees or grows them. And then in the spring, they have an opportunity when people can volunteer to have a tree planted on their property. Some municipalities have their town highway planting the trees, others have big volunteer efforts where volunteers are doing the work. So Northampton did this early on and has planted, I think, thousands of trees at this point. It's very noticeable and it's mostly volunteer driven, although there is a DPW nursery for it. And so the big opportunity in West Upton is that you can have what are called public shade trees, street trees, planted within the first 20 feet of the front setback. So if a property owner agrees, the town can plant the tree on the front setback. It becomes a public shade tree. And it's the responsibility, I believe, of the town to then maintain that tree. And since the space between the sidewalk and the street, even in the best of circumstances, is pretty narrow, trees don't do as well there as they often do in the front yard. So I think there's a great opportunity if there's will to make it happen in Upton to start planting trees, particularly along Main Street. Heading to the west. So this is the connectivity. Because the streets have sort of limited opportunities due to the rights of way and what's already been done, it seems like every connection that can be made through the backs of properties and between open spaces and properties is really important. You see that in Peter's plans, right? So creating nice circulation through the middle of properties, alleys, which you get nice spaces to be in that are not subjected to the noise of trucks and the traffic that's heading through this area. So I think that's a feature that should be encouraged in all private development, connecting across the lines, creating little pedestrian paths. And then there are a few opportunities that seem really important. So connecting from the Knowlton Circle up to the back of the property or the one next door. It seems really important.
It's Betsy, I'm the daycare.
Yeah, to Betsy, and it's important both because it connects from Pleasant Street to Main Street, but also because you have Blackstone Valley Regional Tech High School, and we've heard that kids are walking along the railroad tracks. So,
There's no sidewalk on there.
yeah, there's no sidewalk on Maple. So this could give them a way to get up and along a sidewalk and through the woods to buy their coffee and bagels. Likewise, there's a cemetery down here. Maybe it's possible to connect from Blackstone Valley over through the cemetery to the Maple, but then you're in a spot where there aren't sidewalks and it's a narrow Adding sidewalks at Hartford Ave would be great if you can fit them in. And then,
Can I ask,
yeah.
are sidewalks possible to be added along Maple? Or is it just, are there constrained? Got it.
You can look into it further. I think
Up to the center.
it's pretty narrow.
Yeah, it's depending on how big that right of way is. The street itself.
I think it's, I can't remember if it was this one or Hartford Ave, it's like 35 feet. So very, very narrow, but possibly.
We should try.
And one area that you have to take out the banking to, the rest is narrow, I agree, but it's one area where it goes around a turn, you have to take out banking and build a wall.
It's you worth it though, considering it's you.
Absolutely.
Right?
We built the high school 25 years ago.
Oh.
Get it, yeah.
Safety thing with the kids.
Yeah.
If we all get angry enough, I can make that.
And then connecting from sort of the back of the gas station up into the town open space and then back over to the street whose name I do not remember. It's the
Lodge.
Lodge, the very steep one. So that you can make a connection from West Upton Center into that open space that's town owned back there. Those all seem like great opportunities. So placemaking, we talked about this in the workshop. Placemaking is basically using sort of low cost tactics and sort of arts and beautification to both test places and also test ideas. So trying things out first and then making them permanent, they make sense. But also just generally to make a place come to life. So there's the big investments of buildings and streets, sort of set the framework, but then the things that bring a place to life, that really bring it to life, are plantings and lighting and public art and little outdoor spaces to sit and enjoy life. These are all examples of placemaking. Some of the places that we talked about in the workshop that people mentioned were this big white wall, the liquor store, the alley that I mentioned before, the sort of leftover space between what used to be the curb, I assume, in front of my restaurant and what's now the edge of the sidewalk. And then the sort of mulch and meatball shrub zone by the bank. Which is, perfectly acceptable landscaping, low maintenance for a bank. But it could also be something more if the bank wanted to have a little seating area that people could actually enjoy. So lots of opportunities there. Precedent Native Center has invested a lot in arts and placemaking, working with their regional planning agency, which is called MAPC. So one example, they put out a call for artist-led demonstrations to kind of reinforce the town's identity and its economic vitality. These are like beaded hearts. Shane, who put this together, said this woman worked on these for like 20 years. Kind of amazing. Makes me really nervous that they're on the wall and somebody could come with a knife and just cut the string and her 20 years of work could disappear. And then using lighting, so this is a lighting installation on the side of a building. Very cool. So in one case, they were looking at how to improve an intersection. And they wanted to kind of test out, like, can we narrow the street edges in this intersection? So they put out a call to artists to design little art pieces that go on the side of the street, that basically urge people not to drive there, right? And so one artist painted this mural of koi fish and water near the catch basin. Somebody else did this love 01760. And what they found is that this actually did slow traffic. And so then they ended up doing an investment in changing roadways and making permanent changes. Soul of Rockland is another example. So Rockland has a shoemaking history, and they did a project where they had this little bench that's up in the upper left, and that was like a mobile. It was referring to a shoe shine stand. So it was like a mobile shoe sign stand, and they had people come and they drew a stencil of their shoe. And then they did art, I guess, inside the outline of the shoe. And they asked people which places in Rockland they really loved. They recorded that, and then they took the stencil art and they put it in front of the places that people loved. And then I think there's some web component to that. Pittsfields, they took their little alley. This is an area that was sort of down on its heels. And so they wanted to use art as a way to making this place more appealing and attractive. So they took the little alley, painted an interesting pattern on the grounds. Hung some umbrellas, put out some chairs, and some planters. And I think it's, it looks like a nice place to hang out. Painted a nice crosswalk. And they found that it actually did result in more foot traffic. It did slow down traffic. It's been sort of a catalyst to longer term revitalization of the area. And then this is an example from Halifax, Nova Scotia, of how you can sort of test things out. So here's the street before. Here's painting the road, putting out tables and chairs, testing if it makes sense for that to be more of a pedestrian street, and then eventually turning it into full-on pedestrian street with super cool pavement. So I don't know that there's an opportunity for a pedestrian street in West Upton Center, but that process of let's try something quickly and cheaply, see if it works. And then if it is, start applying for grants and try to find the funding to make something happen. Historic preservation, we've heard a lot of love of the buildings that are there. You guys didn't say no, so I'm gonna end up going through all these slides. So a couple opportunities here, establishing a local historic district, which would then regulate changes to those structures. It's something that people mentioned in the workshop is being explored in Upton. Embracing adaptive reuse and just making sure that new structures and buildings are designed to reflect the local history. So an example from around the corner from our office, there was this red old house that was in poor repair with a really deep lot. So somebody purchased the house, they kept the historic structure, but basically took it back down to the frame, and renovated the whole thing, and then put townhouses that stretch back from the front building, right? So the existing structure was maintained, it was given new life, and then a series of townhouses were added to the back. That, as you can see in this photo, you can't really see the townhouses from the front of the structure, from the front of the building. And the townhouses themselves are really nicely designed, sort of massing, detailing that fits in with the historic character. And if you have $800,000 or $900,000, you can buy one of these townhouses and have a great place to live in the center of Florence. Another example of adding buildings behind historic structures, again from Northampton. So looking at these two buildings here, both substantial historic houses that have been added to over time. So here's a before change, particularly on the building on the right, and then after the change. So I think what's great here is you don't really see a lot of change, right? Except that the paint job has gotten better in the building on the right, in my opinion. The street edge has gotten nicer. Sidewalks have been replaced with, they went from asphalt to nice concrete sidewalks. This tree and some of the front parking went away. The parking was sort of formalized and pushed to the back. And so the building on the left has sort of additions that have been added over time, and then they added this kind of coach house type unit in the back. And the building on the right has a bigger sort of apartment style addition to it that you don't see from the street, and provides much needed housing next to downtown Northampton, while providing the money to fix up the front. right? To redo all the wood that needed to get redone, to redo the windows that needed to get fixed. And to do a nice paint job. So I talked about this earlier, but everything that's hatched here is non-conforming for one reason or another, which means there are extra barriers to making changes to these properties. And so I imagine it can be a hassle for property owners, and it's especially a hassle if you want to do something significantly different. So this is either the results of zoning that was applied that just didn't reflect the character, somebody didn't do a good enough job of actually looking at what's there, or it was done intentionally with the idea of transforming this area over time. Or sometimes this is done because people don't want change. They want it to be onerous for property owners. So kind of going, if anybody has the institutional memory, go back and help us understand why the zoning was put in place, it would be good to know. But as a general recommendation, I would say it makes sense for your zoning to at least match the existing character of what's there. So that it's not a barrier to making small changes to properties. And then if you want change, like if you think that the vision that Peter showed makes sense and you want there to be additional development so that you can get things like shared parking or nice pedestrian spaces or more housing or more commercial space to either provide space for businesses that you want to patronize or support your tax base. If you want any of that stuff, then the zoning has to allow that to happen. So we need to change the zoning to make it possible. So that is things like maybe changing the zoning boundaries for that industrial district, revising the use and dimensional standards for the zoning, reducing the parking requirements, which, as Peter said, basically they require a little over 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet. Currently, you probably only need 3 for commercial uses. So that means that if any development happens, it's going to be a lot of parking and not much building. And then developing design guidelines to guide the look and the feel of future developments and streetscape enhancements in this area. And then finally, just how does this relate to economic development? So this project is sponsored by the EDC. So I think all of that is, when you add all of that up, you could have a more sort of vibrant, attractive commercial center. You can create more space for literally create more space. You can have placemaking that draws in customers. You can make it easier to move in and around so that people visit more businesses, and so on. And then just a last example. So West Acton Village Center, I think, puts all of this together. So it's a series of renovated historic structures for businesses, new construction, streetscape improvements, open space improvements, and so on. So this is a new construction building in the middle there with a new crosswalk with one of those flashing lights and textured pavement that he was talking about.
They also incorporated the old houses that were
Yep.
on that. Oh,
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. So when you look at it from above, what you see is that it looks like a series of, so some of them are old houses, some of them are new construction, and it's all connected with this big box in the back. The big box in the back has parking underneath it, and then it also has a row of parking lots that are connected along the back, similar to the ideas that we showed there. And then just really nicely done streetscape with cafe seating, little front yards surrounded by fences for retail display, all the kind of businesses that people love in their town centers of coffee and yoga and home goods and ice cream and a cute little French deli, bistro, whatever thing, restaurant. And then across the street, they built a park and playground. So it is possible to put all those pieces together and have a practical village center. All right. Any thoughts about any of that? Questions, comments?
I think West Acton is a perfect example of what would happen.
Right. So
Next steps.
next steps. So was there any, it didn't seem like there was anything that we showed that was like offensive.
You took away both gas stations.
Is that offensive?
No, it's not offensive. But stations, that's what we have in town.
Yeah.
We'll need one.
We gotta put one somewhere.
Mhm. So I think that if there isn't, I think the next step is to refine these plans a little bit more and refine the actions a little bit more and come back to the next meeting with that.
Yeah, for instance, I have no idea what the actual parking ratio is
Mhm.
for all the existing and all the proposed. Maybe too much parking, maybe not.
Well, I was gonna say, it's a little scary looking at how much parking is there. Is it possible to put some parking into those proposed buildings rather than open lots?
Yeah, well, in this scheme, the new Coach Road Apartments has parking underneath.
Okay.
Instead of,
How does that work for accessibility?
having parking below.
Right. Accessibility for a disabled person, where would they park?
So a building like that would be, a building like that would have elevators.
Yeah.
So
That would be financially feasible? That elevator?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did it in that other apartment down the street.
Really nine, which is 60 apartments, that's elevators.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you have to have elevators these days, anytime you say. But that'd be, well,
yeah, so
that'll have to be all.
the parking under the structures is more expensive. So that's, I think, one reason we didn't show parking under every building is it's just.
Yeah,
Basically.
yeah, usually don't see it until you get the full size, well, I think it's the full size apartments, like a 60-foot wide building with a central corridor and an apartment on both sides. And really, you need to have something at that scale to get the parking underneath.
So down as limitations on height, the moment, and thus,
Yep.
that need to change.
Yeah, do you have a sense of what height of buildings, what number of stories would be acceptable in the center of the center?
I think the highest would be 3, I believe, so most of the zoning towns too. So it would be 3 stories, I don't know. Historically, the buildings that were there before.
Yeah, there were
at least 3 stories.
3.5.
Yeah, the hotel at the corner was 4 with a tower.
Right.
And of course, the mill is, it varies between 4 and 6.
Yeah, the Upton Inn on the street.
So a lot of it, I mean, like most zoning puts limits on height because it's easier to prevent something bad from happening with zoning than to promote something good. So most zoning sort of is, I think it's designed to stop the worst thing from happening instead of allowing something wonderful. So a lot of towns will allow extra height, but then with more rules, design standards, a clearer approval process that makes you prove that the extra height won't have detrimental effects on the neighborhood and so on. But it's kind of silly just to not allow height for no reason, other than you're afraid something bad would happen. Because you look at the historic buildings and they're beautiful, and the taller ones.
So the Upton business district down here, there was a height restriction, but could be a similar set of standards for both ends of town.
I think that's a good question.
Yeah.
We should explore more. I think they're
Mike, do you know that
Different
height
places.
restriction in the business district?
Well, That's what Bill was referencing. This district is 2.5 stories, but up to 5 stories by special permit. Everywhere else in town, it's roughly 2.5 stories. I think CNI districts I think it's limited to like 1.
Wonderful to have something that replicated in some way. One or more of those astonishing old buildings. Those that were torn down to make, the code apartments and things like that. They were just, we wondered when that happened, but we have the book and they're astonishing. They were gorgeous. And can you imagine if something like that were anchoring West Upton? I think people would stop and pay attention.
Again, in the dreaming phase.
Yeah.
And money really shouldn't be a cost. But again, in saying that we have so much stable parking there. When our parking structure, so we get rid of one of those sort of things, double up. Say like one, like the half one, say if we doubled up that one, got rid of one of the other ones, at least it would create some more open space. I was noticing in Acton that parking was actually underneath, but up. So not necessarily the same parking even underground,
Right.
but under the first level of the building being parking. On those, like, for instance, the buildings behind where Phil's house is. So we could decrease those, that amount of asphalt back there.
And I know in West Acton, it took advantage of natural slope right behind the buildings, which was slow. Like you don't even notice it. It ends up a level down.
Yeah, of course, West Acton is convenient because it drops away from the road.
Yeah.
Here it rises as you go back from the road. So it's,
Well,
yeah, we'll look at that and look for more examples. I think it's interesting.
The spaces behind, where the, where the Hexers, where the laundromat is, that building, that parking lot, I believe is sloped down, isn't it? So the 3 houses that are up there, their backyard is sloped down.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, that would be a good place to put a 2-story. And it would only seem like it was one, because you have one lower grade.
All right. So thank you all for coming tonight. If you have any other thoughts, feel free to reach out to us. I'm Dylan at dodsonflinker.com. He's Peter at dodsonflinker.com. And we will see you all in January.